Welcome to the Home Birth After Cesarean podcast. Due to the rate of unnecessary C-sections, the lack of support, and limited options for VBAC moms in the hospital, more and more women are choosing to have their VBAC babies at home. This podcast was created for women to share and listen to stories of home birth after cesarean. I'm your host, Rachel Garrett. So today we have Danielle with us, and she is going to share her birth stories. So Danielle, if you just want to start us off with a little bit of an introduction, that would be great.
Well, as she said, I'm Danielle, and I am a mom of 4. I homeschool 3 of them. We live on the beautiful island of Maui in Hawaii, but we haven't always lived here. And my birth experiences are coming from mainland, not an island perspective. So I want to make that clear because it can be very different between the two. Let's see, I am a bookkeeper for my husband's businesses, and I'm also a wedding photographer.
So how long have you lived there then? You said that was after your birth experiences?
Yes, we've lived here for over 2 years.
Well, if you just want to take us to wherever you want to start with that first pregnancy.
Oh, yeah, my first pregnancy was horrid. It was not a good experience. I had problems from the get-go. It was really rough, and to be honest, my body hates being pregnant. I love the experience and the journey, but my body hates it, fights it the entire time. But my first pregnancy, I was in the hospital like 3 or 4 times because I was dehydrated just from being sick all the time. And like very early on, I started having blood pressure problems, which was really out of the normal for me. Between that and being sick and all that, it was just miserable. I ended up having my first at 28 weeks, and that was really traumatic. So that all happened with, I went to the doctor, it was about 26 weeks, and they did my blood pressure, and my blood pressure was like extremely high. It was like 220 over 180, which I should have been having a stroke or heart attack or something at that point. So they were panicked, and they admitted me to the hospital. And at that time, we were in this little coastal town that didn't have good facilities or anything. So I had to transfer to a bigger town with a specialist, and ended up having him 2 weeks later due to my body basically starting to go in what's called HELP syndrome during pregnancy. So it's basically where like preeclampsia elevates beyond preeclampsia, and it's like a life or death situation. So they had to take him at 28 weeks. We were in the hospital with him for just a little over 2 months. So that was my first birth experience, and it was very traumatic. I had him, a week before my 19th birthday. Being young and naive, you just don't really fully realize what's going to happen. And at that time, I didn't realize how bad it was or anything. And that is one experience that I could say where a C-section was definitely needed. You know, there's a lot of experiences where C-sections are not needed, and I can give more examples of those in my next pregnancies or next C-sections. But that is one I can say was definitely needed. Like, because at that point it was like one of us is going to die or both of us is going to die, and they had to get him out. My pregnancy was the same but different with my second.
How much of an age gap was there?
So there was 3.5 years between the first and the second. My first healing with my first C-section healing was amazing. It was great. It wasn't like rough or anything. I healed well. I was up walking. Well, I had to be in bed for a certain amount of time, but once they let me up and walking, I was like walking as much as I could. My second, I went in for a doctor's appointment at just past 35 weeks. Because of what happened with the first, they were really carefully monitoring things, and everything was going okay. I was starting to have a blood pressure problem, but it was later on. But I went in for a regular checkup. They were doing blood draws every time I went in to check platelet levels, because what happened with my first is my platelets dropped drastically. And so they really wanted to monitor that in my second pregnancy. So when I went in for my 35-week appointment, they did that. And the doctor was concerned because they could see it starting to happen again, what happened in the first pregnancy, but it was at a much slower pace. So my doctor said, "You're not going home today. We're going to deliver this baby today." So they admitted me to the hospital, and they gave me the option to have an induction or go for a C-section. But I was still really young. I mean, I was only 22 at that point. And when the nurse came in and explained the induction to me, it scared me, because they're like, "We'll have to stick this device up there." Now I know more and I know what they were talking about, but at that time I had no idea. They were like, "We would have to stick this device up there," which is a Foley bulb, but I didn't know what it was called at that time. And we would slowly expand it to try to get your cervix to open. And at that time, at a certain point, we would start giving you Pitocin to try to give you contractions, but there's still a very high risk you would end up being a C-section again. And she just wasn't very comforting when explaining all this. So it kind of terrified me in an already scary situation because of what happened with my first. I knew what to expect with a C-section. So I was just like, okay, just do the C-section, because the first one sounds absolutely terrifying right now.
And if an induction is presented like, well, you might end up in an emergency C-section anyway, then it's like, well,
Yeah,
what's the point if
exactly. And they don't tell you, yeah, they're, especially after a first C-section, there's still a high, even with an induction, there's still a high success rate, but they don't tell you that or expound on that. They just tell you, oh, there's a chance you could just end up in an emergency C-section again. So I went for the C-section again. That C-section went off great. Baby was born, but within a few hours, there's an issue with the baby. And the issue was that he had inhaled amniotic fluid when they pulled him out, because they pulled him out in a different direction than they normally because of his positioning. So he ended up in the hospital for a little bit, only like a week, because his blood sugars were low and they were trying to get the fluid out of his lungs. He did great. I had no plan of becoming pregnant anytime soon. I was like, I want to wait. I liked the 3-year gap. I wanted to just stick with that. That did not happen. I got pregnant. Let's see. He was like not even a year, quite a year old when I got pregnant again with my third. And that pregnancy was probably the easiest pregnancy out of the 3. And my doctor at that time didn't give me an option. I mean, that was almost 12 years ago, but he didn't give me an option to try for VBAC or anything at that time. It was just like, automatic C-section. So I did the C-section. C-section went great, but in postpartum, I started to have severe hemorrhaging and lost mass amounts of blood that they were going to have to take me back in to surgery for a different type of surgery, and then do a blood transfusion. Finally, they got the bleeding to stop. I begged my doctor not to do a transfusion right away. He said, okay, we'll hold off, but if your numbers don't go up in the next hour, you're getting a blood transfusion whether you want it or not. Everything went fine after that, but it did take me several months to recover after that C-section, just because of the mass amount of blood loss and then having a newborn baby, a toddler, and a 5-year-old. So it took months of recovery after that. And because of, the severe postpartum hemorrhage, I swore I was done having kids. I'm like, I'm done. Never again. I don't want to go through that. It was horrible. And that's another thing a lot of doctors don't talk about is with each C-section, your risks for, postpartum hemorrhaging, there's several different things, previa, all those things that go up after each C-section, and they don't talk about that enough either.
Yeah, you often hear the risks associated with a VBAC, but don't always hear all of the risks associated with another C-section, especially depending on which number C-section it is.
Yeah, and your risk for infections even go up after each C-section. It's a major abdominal surgery.
Had you had VBAC on your mind at all before that third C-section? I know you said your doctor really didn't make it an
Yeah,
option.
I had like, okay, I would like to, I want to see if it's an option to have a VBAC, because especially after we made it past, like 36-week mark, I was like, okay, I want to see if there's an option, especially if I wait to go full term. But I was, again, still young. I was only like 24, 25 at that time. And I wasn't educated enough to say, okay, or question what my doctor say, hey, what about these options? And so I didn't push for it when I probably should have been like, hey, what about this? And honestly, there's several, like I've met good doctors and doctors that just want to do their job. And I've met doctors that, want to sit there and educate yourself and educate themselves to be better understanding and have more knowledge of certain aspects, because no one patient is the same. And my doctor was he was a great doctor. He was amazing. I loved him, but he was more of the, let's just do it this one way. And I was too young to question it. And that's another thing, is a lot of people don't realize you can question your doctor. It's okay.
Well, exactly like you said, each patient is different and you have different values, you have different wants, you have different family planning intentions. I mean, if you're someone who wants to have a huge family and have 8 or 10 kids or whatever, if you have those first couple C-sections, your chances of being able to have that many children, I mean, because with each with each cesarean, different risks going up, you don't want to have 8 or 10 cesareans. So,
No,
I mean, if well, I only want 2 kids, and so, I mean, it changes the way that you look at what your options are for your births or what you want to have in the future, because there are people who are okay with having repeat elective cesareans, and that's fine with them, and that's the risk that they choose to have. But when you're not having those full conversations and having someone give you that information so that you can make the best choice for you, it takes that choice out of your hands, and that's difficult.
it does. And I don't know, like after my third C-section, I also felt like I didn't have control over my body or what my choice was for my body. And so I swore, I was like, after everything I had gone through with the previous 3 and then going through that horrible postpartum hemorrhage experience, I was like, I'm done. I'm never having kids again. We're done, babe. I'm done. But about probably 5 years later, I would say it wasn't even 5 years later, I wanted to educate myself more. And I started reading books, started talking to other women, started just basically finding anything I could about, C-sections, birth, home birth. I read Ina May's books just to see what, she talked about in some of them. I watched YouTube videos about home births, and then that led to trying to find, had anybody had a home birth after 3 C-sections? Was it even possible? Then we got to talking, and we're like, let's try for another one. Let's just, let nature take its course. If it happens, it happens. And so I had the Mirena for that entire time from my third C-section all the way until 6 years later. We decided to get it removed, let nature take its course, but I got pregnant right away. And another thing that I didn't know about that can happen when you use IUDs with hormonal is a lot of women like them because it takes away the period and you don't have to worry about getting pregnant, which is great. I loved it for that reason, but it is putting hormones into your body, and the hormones it is putting into your body makes it so your endometrial lining in your uterus can't build up. And that's why most women don't get periods or get very light periods. It's because it's not allowing it to build up like it should. Well, when you get pregnant, you need that endometrial lining for the placenta to hold on to and grasp onto. So when we got pregnant right away within 2 weeks of getting it removed. And we were excited. We had told people about 12 weeks because I had experienced a miscarriage before. So we were just kind of waiting until after the 12, 13 week mark to tell people. We told people. And then soon after we told people, my grandpa got really sick. He had had cancer for years and got sick. And there's a lot going on with that. Well, during that time, I had to go to my 20-week appointment. And the ultrasound tech got really quiet. And so as soon as she was quiet and not wanting to answer our questions, we knew something was up. I mean, that's another thing is they make it obvious when something's wrong. And so we just had like this a little bit of a sinking feeling. So my doctor came in and said, we see an issue with the baby and we want you to go to the specialist in Seattle. So we went to the specialist, they did ultrasounds, and that is when they explained what was going on with the baby. What was happening was my placenta was starting to detach from the wall. And they explained to us how, it was likely due to there not being enough endometrial lining on the uterus to hold the placenta to it. So the fluid around the baby was starting to be replaced by blood. They recommended terminating the pregnancy, and we just, for personal reasons and, just our own personal convictions, we didn't feel comfortable doing that, even though we're well aware that the likelihood of him making it to 40 weeks and surviving was not going to happen. We went back to our regular doctor. He supported us in that decision, waiting it out, and was like, if you don't wait it out, you'll always wonder what if. So if you just wait it out, you'll know. And at that point, there was more risk to me because of the placenta detaching. We already knew baby wasn't going to make it. The risk to me at that point because you can bleed to death and hemorrhage again. So I just took it easy, was careful, and I had to go get ultrasounds every week to see, what was going on. He ended up passing at 28 weeks on his own. And at that point, I had a really supportive doctor for that experience because I was like, I do not want to have an unnecessary C-section on top of all of this going on and us dealing with this loss. Is there anything else we can do? And he's like, yeah, we can do an induction. He's like, the hospital wasn't the most VBAC friendly hospital. And he's like, we can talk to them. I will tell them, at this point, there's no risk to the baby. It's just you. Your baby's still small. So he got the hospital to go along with it. And I was allowed to have an induction, which that was an experience in itself. After the induction, it was a terrible loss and everything, but it also gave me a confidence that, okay, I can do this. Yeah, this was a different experience. And even at that point, doctors don't count it as a VBAC. So
wow.
So they just,
that.
Yeah, so they just counted it because he wasn't considered full term. They call it an induction. They don't call it a VBAC. They call it an induction. Even though at that point it wasn't considered a VBAC, I was like, okay, I did this way. I did it faster. So they warn you that, this could take several days. It only took me 24 hours to deliver the baby. And my doctor was shocked at even it took that long. Or I shouldn't say that long, that short of time. So, but it gave me a confidence that, okay, my body does know to a point what it's doing. I'd never been in labor before or gone into labor before. And it let me know my body is not a lemon, basically. It's not broken. It does know what to do. It can do it. So after that, we, grieved, all that. And I had to go in for my 6-week checkup with my doctor. And I was like, okay, so when do you think is okay to start, not preventing it and just let nature take its course again? He's like, Honestly, anytime when you feel ready. It's like you didn't deliver a full-term baby. It's not like your body had to go through as much trauma going through a full-term pregnancy and delivery. So whenever you feel comfortable, that's when I say you can go ahead and do it. So it was like, okay, so we gave our body time to heal and just emotionally heal. We had 3 other kids who were dealing with the loss too.
Can you talk, if you're comfortable, can you talk about that a little bit? Just all of the emotions that you as a family went through or different supports that you used?
Yeah, so I think my biggest support was number one, my husband, and honestly, just myself, and not trying to like cover up things, but just deal with them. Deal with them, get it out of the way. Once I did that, it was fine. Like the hardest part, honestly, was, it was hard walking out of the hospital knowing you had a baby, but they weren't going home with you. It was hard the first night not feeling that baby with you or having them next to you. That was hard. But the hardest part, when it, like, I wasn't in too much pain or anything. The hardest part was dealing with my milk trying to come in and nothing, like the pain of being engorged and then not being able to feed a baby, but my body knows there's supposed to be a baby to feed. That was honestly probably the hardest part of it all, because every time there was like pain in my breast from being engorged, it was like brought up the pain that there's no baby there. And so once I just dealt with it, there was one day where my mom had flew in to be with the kids, help with the kids. And there was one day where I just laid in bed and cried all day. I didn't care. I just laid there and cried. And I think that was the best thing I could do, because once I cried and got it all out, I went through all the different emotions. I grieved, I was mad, I was hurt, all in that one day. But once I got it out, I was better. And I knew I needed to get it out because I had 3 other kids that needed their mommy and were going through their own emotions, because even though they didn't experience it in the same way, they knew what was going on. They knew that they weren't going to have a brother coming home. And so I needed to be there for them, and they needed to see that mommy was okay. So that was important to me, to get my emotions out so that they could see mommy was okay, because if mommy was okay, they were going to be okay.
Thank you for
That
sharing
was
all of that.
really, you're welcome. And about 3 or 4 months after that, we were like, okay, we feel we're ready. We'll just let nature take its course. We're not going to prevent anything. When it happens, it happens. But we did want to give a few months because we wanted to give my body enough time to heal and build up a good endometrial lining, because we did not want to go through that possible experience again. So about 4 months later, we decided to let nature take its course, and I got pregnant right away again. During that pregnancy, I was okay. Like, I did great. Once we got past the 20 weeks, I felt a little more relief. And I knew I wanted a VBAC. I didn't really know about home birth, but like when we first got pregnant before, I wanted a VBAC. But I didn't, because of everything going on. I never got a chance to, talk with my doctor or really search out another doctor, because there's just too much going on. And, at the point we knew he wasn't going to make it, we were kind of like, yeah, what's the point? So with my next pregnancy, I was like, I know this is what I want. This is what I'm going to do. But I just didn't have confidence to talk about it until we got after the 20-week ultrasound, and we knew everything was okay with the baby. And then once we got past the 28-week ultrasound, I was like, okay, now I know this is what I want. We're okay. Everything's okay. We're doing this. And then came the real struggle, because my doctor, I had the same doctor, but he wasn't as supportive of going through with the VBAC after 3 C-sections as he was the induction, because of the risks. Now, I think if I would have went into the hospital and demanded, this is what we're doing and fought it, he probably would have been like, okay, I ain't fighting with you, because that was just the kind of person he was. He was just like, okay, it's your body, you do what you want. And before that, I had gone and interviewed several doctors not in my area, because I lived in a smaller town, but had driven like 3+ hours to doctors that were very supportive of VBAC. And they were just like, we can't take you on at this point. And I even had one doctor tell me, I can't take you on because of my other colleagues in our clinic, but I think you can do this. He's like, I know you can do this. You would probably be very successful. And he's like, you do what you have to do. And he's like, even if you have to come into the hospital in labor ready to push, you do that. You do you. And I think that gave me another boost of confidence to hear a doctor say, okay, yes, you can do this. You would probably be very successful. So then after that, I was just feeling down because I wasn't finding any supportive doctor. That caused a lot of other issues to be brought up from the loss. And then I started feeling kind of doubting myself, and it was bringing up anxiety and other issues. And then once I got past that, which with the help of my husband, I was like, you know what? Yeah, we can do this. And my husband was very supportive. I think that's another huge thing, is having a very supportive husband. Or if you don't have a supportive husband, or your husband doesn't know how to be supportive, get a doula or something. Find somebody who's your support. But I started looking around for home birth midwives. My last option was to stay at home as long as possible and go into the hospital in labor and say, no, I'm not having a C-section. I'm doing this my way. But I really wanted to try to find a home birth midwife. I looked everywhere. I found somebody 3 hours away from me, and she was like, if you want to come here do it, I will do it with you. But that's just really risky and a long drive. So she started helping me find other midwives that might be closer to me. And we finally found one. And she had done VBACs. She hadn't done anything more than after one C-section. Oh, and here's another thing. We didn't find her until I was 35 weeks pregnant. And I didn't tell my doctor my plans or anything. I just kept going and seeing him because he was really good for that aspect. And then we went and interviewed her within 2 days of finding her. She was an hour and a half away. And we went and interviewed with her. She's like, you know what? I really need to think about this and make sure that I'm doing the right thing. So a few days later, she called us back. And that was another thing, is she wasn't comfortable coming to us. She wanted to figure out a way for us to be near her because she was familiar with her hospital. She had worked with the doctors at her hospital. And she just wasn't as comfortable coming to our area. So when she called back a couple days later, she said, is this something you guys are sure you want to do? And I was like, yes, we know we want to do this. We know we want to go this route. And she's like, okay, let's do this. And she's like, I know the house is an issue, so I'm going to offer up my house to you guys to be able to do it in. And let's do this. So I was about 36 weeks at that point, and we had set up my appointment for right at about 36 weeks. So I continued to see her from 36 weeks on. And I think because of all the stress of everything at that point, my blood pressure was up a little bit, but it wasn't concerning to her. And it wasn't at a level that should be concerning. It was just, it started to go up. And because of my history, she's like, we just need to carefully watch this. Everything went great. At 37 weeks, I started having prodromal labor, which is miserable. If anybody's ever had it, and it's different for everybody. It's not like you can read it and what to expect when you're expecting, and it's the same for everybody. It's very different. For me, it was like 5 to 6 hours every morning, just feeling miserable, and like basically Braxton Hicks, more like contractions, but they were like more together, just not very strong. So this went on every morning from 37 weeks until I had the baby. I went into labor at 39 weeks and 5 days in the middle of winter. Where we lived, it snowed, and it would snow a lot. I woke up the day before. The day before I felt great. I had like a huge burst of energy. I have food allergies, but I was craving a donut, and I never eat donut because of those food allergies. But I was craving a donut, so I was like, I'm going to go get a donut. I ate a donut. That was the only morning I had not had the prodromal labor. And I didn't think anything about it. I was just feeling great. I wanted my donut. So the next morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning, I started having what I thought was intestinal cramping from eating my donut, because that's what some food allergies feel like. And I was like, oh man, this is miserable. And I kept feeling like I had to go to the bathroom. Was it happening? And my husband's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, it's just that stupid donut I ate. It's causing me problems. And I kept having to feel like I was going to the bathroom every 5 minutes. He's like, I don't think so. And so he knew we had to time contractions, because the midwife had talked to him, if she starts having contractions, make sure you time them, because we had to drive an hour and a half to her. So he timed them for like 20 minutes, and I was having gas pains like every 3 minutes, lasting like 60 seconds. He's like, I'm calling the midwife. So he called the midwife, told her what was going on, and she was like, you need to leave now. I was like, I got everything I needed. I was ready to go in 30 minutes. But my husband thought he needed to shower.
He needed to get ready for the birth.
As I was in the shower, I was like, by this time they were like coming on really strong. I was feeling a little stronger than, intestinal cramps. And I was actually having to like stop a little bit through the contractions and breathe through them. But I still was not convinced I was in labor at this point. I was like, I'm not in labor. So we got in the car. We were in the car by 5:15 in the morning. And we got in the car. We were driving, having contractions the whole drive. And I was actually getting mad, because I'm like, I'm going to be so mad if this is false labor. And we get all the way there and it's not the real thing. I was like, I'm going to be so mad. But the drive wasn't too horrible. The contractions had spaced out a little more, but they were coming in stronger and harder. We got to the midwife's house. She had everything ready and set up. She had one really nice room set up I feel blessed, because she had put soothing lights on, put up birth affirmations for us. I wanted to do a water birth. She had set up the pool for us. Everything was ready to go. The only thing is she didn't want to heat up the water for the pool until we were there and ready to get in. And she didn't want us getting in until after 6 centimeters, or the transition period, because the pool, I guess, can slow down labor if you get in too early. So we got there. I had to go to the bathroom. I went to the bathroom. I am one of those people who I didn't have my bloody show or anything until right then when I went to the bathroom. And at that point, she could tell I was about 3 or 4 centimeters just because of that happening. Right after going to the bathroom, she had me get comfortable, whatever I wanted to wear, get in bed. And I had one really big, strong contraction. And she's like, I want to check you just to, see where we're at. And at that point, I was at 6 centimeters already. So she's like, if you want to get in the pool, you can. So
do you remember about what time that was at?
So let's see, we left our house about 5:15. We had an hour and a half drive. We had a snowstorm 2 days before. So my husband was trying to drive as quickly and safely as possible. And we got to her house a little before 7. And by 7:20, 7:30 is when I was able to get in the pool. I'd started feeling, at that point, soon after getting into the pool, I started transition. And I had horrible back labor. Horrible. Like afterwards, she's like, you've had the worst back labor I've ever seen, because she could literally see the back base of my spine spasming up and tensing. I'm very thankful for the pool because I think it helped a lot, and I cannot imagine what it would have been like afterwards. But after being in the pool a little bit, once I was in transition, it like took off. It was no slowing down, and she got concerned because I was shooting out little squirts of blood. And what was happening was I was dilating so fast that the blood vessels on my cervix were bursting. It was kind of odd to see it happen and a little concerning, but that's what was happening. And by 9:24, baby was delivered. So she estimated it from the first contraction to when baby arrived. I had like a 5-hour labor, which is amazing and crazy all at the same time, because your body has no chance to slowly go into it. It's like, 0 to 60 and
Like, boom, you're in labor.
yeah.
And then there's a baby.
And so even when baby was like, up until transition, I still was not convinced I was in labor. When transition hit, I was like, oh man, this is horrible. And I still didn't think I was that far into my labor process. And so I was thinking once transition hit, I still had like a ways to go. And I was like, I can't handle this. This is horrible. This is awful. And she's like, no, you're in transition. It's almost over. And I'm like, there's no way. It can't be. This is my first time. Every story I read, it was like women took quite a long time. Some women were in labor for a couple days. And I was like, never thought I would have been one of those women to experience a fast labor. For technically, it wasn't my first, but it was my first time going into labor on my own. And so up until transition, and she's like, no, you're almost having a baby. You're going to have a baby anytime. I was not convinced I was in labor. So once baby was here, I was like, and she's like, your baby's out. I was like, no way. I was like, really? She's like, yeah, you can turn over. I'm like, because I labored in the pool on my hands and knees, because that was the only comfortable position for me in back labor. And that's another thing. Find a midwife who's there and supportive, but as hands off as possible, because she was like, you do what your body tells you. If your body tells you to do this, that's what you do. And I will be here to support you, and your husband will be here to hold you if you need to, but you do what you need to do. So I did. And once I had the baby out, I was like, I still couldn't believe the baby was out. Like, I was in shock. I was like, no way. My husband's like, you did it. You did it. You did so good. You did it. And I'm like, holy cow.
That just happened.
I was like literally saying, oh my goodness, I can't breathe. Holy cow. I like literally felt like my midwife even said, she like had to help me breathe, because at some points I was like holding my breath so intense, she thought I would pass out. So I was like in total shock, like when it actually happened. And then like that birth high you always hear about, it's totally a real thing. Like I was like, yeah, whatever. Like, I'm sure it's real, but I'm not sure it's like, as big as you make it out to be. And it totally is. I think especially after having C-sections and then feeling like going through the motions of feeling like, oh, well, maybe my body can't give birth naturally. Maybe I'm only can have C-sections, to having 3 C-sections and then delivering at home at vaginal birth. It was just like an incredible high. At that point, we sent pictures and told my family, because at that point I hadn't told my family what I was doing. I have very opinionated family members. And so we had only told 2 people what we were doing, my mom and his mom, because, well, my mom, I knew she wouldn't give me anything negative, because she's like, even if she doesn't agree with it, she'll keep her mouth shut and say, you know what, it's your choice, you do you. And we told his mom because we were counting on his mom to come and help watch with the kids. So they were the only 2 people we knew about. So as soon as he was born, my husband sent a picture, and he was bragging about it and was like, yeah, Judd Marshall Carlson delivered the date, time, all of that at home in the water and all this other stuff. A lot of my family is in the healthcare industry, like nurses and physician assistants and licensed practitioners and stuff. And so that's another reason I kept a lot of it to myself, was because I didn't want to deal with backlash on that end, I guess. And then even when they came out, they said, wait, whoa, what? You had a VBAC after 3 C-sections and you did it at home? My cousin was like, you're giving me a heart attack. And she's a L&D nurse. And I was like, yep, I did it my way. And I think that's really important for women to understand, is there is options out there for you. You can do it your way. Finding somebody supportive, whether it's a doctor or a home birth midwife, finding a supportive provider is, I think, that one of the biggest keys to success. And another huge key is being confident in yourself and knowing that your body isn't broken, educating yourself and being confident in your education, that, or your knowledge of what you've educated yourself with. Because I know for me, I knew what I wanted. I was like, nothing's holding me back at this point. And I did it. And then when I did it, I couldn't believe I did it. So I think that's
so awesome.
One of my biggest things for women is to be confident, educate yourself, be confident in that education, find supportive provider, and educate your husband at the same time too. Because I think that was another huge thing, is my husband wanted to know why I was making these choices and wanted to educate himself so he understood better. And if your husband's not willing to do that, then find a doula or a friend that is, or somebody. Because having a supportive circle is huge.
So important. Especially when, like you were saying, if family maybe is a little bit skeptical, or you're choosing not to share that, or it's something that goes a little bit against the grain of what other people might choose to do, and you have to keep it a little bit closer to your heart for a while, it's still important to have at least one person that you can go to and talk about all of this to, because you have to have someone to kind of process through everything. Even if it's your fourth or your fifth or your sixth birth, there's still going to be something that you're like, okay, I just need to talk this out with someone. So having that one person that you can lean on and that you trust and that will be there to support you in your choices is very important.
Yes, definitely.
So was there any, I know you said you didn't decide on, or you didn't find that midwife until that 35, 36 week mark. From that point until your baby was born, was there any like specific prep or anything that you and your husband did that was VBAC related, or even earlier in the pregnancy, I guess? Or were you just kind of like, I'm just going to do this and we're going to roll with it?
Well, I had read everything. I joined VBAC groups. I even joined VBAC groups that were specifically for vaginal birth after multiple C-sections. Because even if, there's things that, my husband is a great sounding board, but there were things I was concerned about, and I wanted to hear from other women who had gone through, a home birth or a vaginal birth after multiple C-sections, if this was normal, or, if this was okay, or what, just hear others' opinions and experiences. And so I think that was really important too, because it gave because even in those groups, you're going to have like multiple different, like, I can't believe you did home birth, or, yes, do home birth, or you should have had a specialist doctor. Yeah, very opinionated. You're going to have opinions no matter what. But it was very nice to hear others' encouragement, because for the most part, almost everybody was encouraging in them, and they wanted you to succeed, and that's big. I had read other things, to make sure that I had watched my diet very carefully, because I wanted to make sure my blood pressure stayed under control. I wanted to do it by diet as much as possible. So I read things about that. I read up on drinking red raspberry leaf tea. So I didn't start that until 32 weeks. And then I gradually did that. While I don't think it, like I know someone, should I drink tea to make me go into labor? I don't think it'll make you go into labor, but I do think it helps prep your uterus to better handle like the stronger contractions. And then I had read up on dates and a lot of stuff about dates. So at 36 weeks, I started trying to eat dates. They gagged me. I couldn't. I had so many people recommend, oh, do it this way, wrap it in bacon, fill it with cream cheese. I tried, I'm very much a texture person and it was gagging me. So somebody said, oh, Lara bars have 2 dates in them each. So I was like, really? So I read up on it and yeah, Lara bars, the ones made with dates, have 2 dates each in them. So then I started, okay, I can eat Lara bars. So I started eating 3 Lara bars a day. And I really think the dates helped a lot, especially for first time going into labor, how smoothly and, well, labor was intense, but like as far as, cervix dilating, body doing what it's supposed to do with that aspect of it, I think they helped a lot because I did not need any, she didn't have to break my waters. They stayed intact until right before baby came out. I didn't need any kind of, need to like strip the rest of my membranes or, anything that you hear about happening a lot in hospitals or, I've heard a lot of weird things. So I was like thankful that none of that happened. And I think the dates helped a lot with that. So that was really the only prep, I guess you could say I did. I didn't do childbirth classes. I had asked my midwife if she thought I should get a doula because it was my first time, going to be my first time going into labor and that stuff. And she had already told me that as soon as I went into labor, she wanted me to come to her house. And if I needed to be there for 2 days, I could. But she didn't think for me it was necessary because she was going to be with me the entire time. But she had said that she recommends it to a lot of women where she can't be with the entire time because they can help, with pressure points and helping with, like my back labor, my midwife was like pushing on my back, whereas the doula would help with that. So I think if you're going to, even in a hospital, you can have doulas in hospital. And I think, a doula is very needed in certain situations. And I would have gotten a doula if it hadn't been for me being with my midwife the whole time.
So then what did the immediate postpartum time look like? So after your baby's born, you're in the pool. Were you, I guess I forgot to ask, backing up a little bit too. You said you were on your hands and knees in the pool for most of the time. Is that the position you pushed in as well? Okay.
That's the position I pushed in. And then as soon as baby came out, she's like, you can turn over. So I turned over and then I was basically sitting in the pool on my bottom. And we stayed in there for a couple minutes and then she had us get out. She gave me tinctures, like a few drops of things to help. And then I was getting kind of tired. My uterus was tired. So she did give me a very small shot of Pitocin to help deliver the placenta because at that point my uterus was like tired. She's like, okay, well, we're just going to give you this little boost. You're not even going to feel it. And I did it. It was small enough that I didn't feel like I'd had Pitocin before and it was nothing like that experience. It was very small. I didn't even feel it. And postpartum was great. Like she kept having to remind me, you're going to feel great compared to your C-sections, but you just had a baby. You need to slow down. You need to, get rest. You need to. And I was like, man, I feel great though. I was like, I could get up and walk. And I did. I was like, I walked and she didn't want me walking alone. She wanted to make sure, but like less than an hour after giving birth, I walked and got up from bed and walked to the bathroom. And it was like, if I had a C-section, I would still be in bed with the catheter in, not being able to get up. And so it was just amazing to feel like more in control of myself and my body and my choices.
And then how did the transition home go? Were you at your midwife's house just for a couple of hours after birth and then you guys went home, or?
No, she had us stay we stayed until the next morning. She checked us. We did all the baby stuff. It was neat because my husband actually got to do all of that. He got to measure the baby with her, do the head circumference. He got to weigh the baby. That never happens in the hospital. So it was a new experience for him too. It wasn't just like, me only. It was new things for him too that he didn't get to be involved in. But we went home. We stayed the first night with her at her home. And then we went home the next morning, and we had asked for no visitors, just for the first, week. There were certain people we did allow to come, but we had just asked for, no visitors for the first week, enjoy our private time. She had made us signs to put up for that. She encouraged that. She's like, this is your time to bond with your baby without interruptions, for your kids to bond with your baby. So she had already given us signs a week of time to put in front of the door or to put on the door and windows. And then when we did allow visitors, she gave us other things, another sign to put in our window and door that said, proper newborn visiting etiquette type thing. And I loved it. It was I would have never thought to do that. You're like, if you're sick, please don't visit right now. Or, once you come in, wash your hands before holding the baby. Please be quiet. No small children at this time during this first, transition period and stuff. And it's just really nice to have things like that, because while you may do it, it's nice to have somebody else make something like a sign for you, so you don't have to be verbal about it. They can just come up and read it and be like, oh, okay. And at that point, I didn't feel like I was being rude. I didn't really care either. It was
But then you still get to have those boundaries too.
Yes. It's wintertime, flu season, sick season. I ain't risking it, but she made a sign for us to put up that was nicely and politely written, but, laid out the rules.
So then, just with all of the emotions from your first couple birth stories, did any of that transfer into this last birth story, or how did all of that connect?
So, yes and no. It didn't transfer to the birth. By the time the birth came, I honestly don't think it had time to register. There was at one point in the birth where my midwife, because she knew the story, all the history and the story and everything. And she's like, at one point during transition, she's like, you just got to let it go, Danielle. Let it go. Breathe through it. You're doing this. It's okay. If you're holding on to anything, just let it go and just relax. So there was that point, but I carried it more in the pregnancy than in the birth, which I think was a blessing and a curse, because by the time birth came, it wasn't there anymore. But like I said, during the pregnancy, I dealt with a lot of anxiety and not necessarily paranoia, but just that intense feeling what can go wrong? What's going to happen? What's going to go wrong? I had anxiety with my husband about certain situations. Even though I know he would never do anything to hurt me or anything, there was just this compounding pressure on my chest at times. And I had to deal with that. And it was very hard because it wasn't something anybody else could fix. I didn't want to take medication for it because there was a reason it was happening and I needed to deal with it. So while it took me nearly most of my pregnancy to deal with, by the end of my pregnancy, most of it had been dealt with. And I think it helped in the labor process too, that I wasn't taking that into labor with me. So it wasn't restricting me more than what it could have.
Yeah, you sometimes hear about emotional blocks that come up during labor that can really stall or completely stop your labor if you're not able to move past them. So
Yeah, I had heard of that too. And that was a worry of mine. Dealing with the anxiety through the pregnancy I was worried about it happening once labor got here, or having so much anxiety towards the end, I chickened out, even though I knew this was what I wanted to do, that I would be too scared at the end with the anxiety and everything going on, that it would be like, I would get to a point and be like, no, just take me to the hospital and get it over with, or whatever. I can't do this. So I knew that I wanted to deal with it, basically take it head on and just deal with it and get it over with. And like I said, I think it helped in the end because I didn't want to have an emotional block or anything once I got to that point.
Anything else you can think of that you want to add?
Don't be scared of home birth. Like for other women, if you've ever watched Call the Midwife, even back then, they were still having babies.
Great show.
It is a great show. They were still having babies at home unless there was an emergency. And yes, those emergencies do happen and they come up, but that's when you find a good, reliable midwife who is familiar with her, the hospital, has relationships with the hospital, is not afraid to admit, okay, this is something I can't handle. We need to go to the hospital to let somebody else handle it. Because I do know midwives out there who are very prideful and won't admit when it gets to a point. And that's dangerous because there are times when you need to get to the hospital or you need to go to the hospital. But don't be scared of home birth just because of that. Your risk of having a home birth are far less than interventions that can happen at a hospital. So I think it's definitely a personal choice. It's not for everybody. And I totally respect that. And I think everybody else should respect that, just like it's a personal choice to have a VBAC or to have a repeat C-section. After my third C-section, and we knew we wanted more kids, I didn't want another C-section. If I had to have a fourth C-section, I was like, we're done. I'm not going to have another baby after a fourth C-section because it'll be harder and harder to find somebody supportive. And I didn't want us to stop having more kids or to grow our family bigger, be determined by a possibly unnecessary surgery for me. And I just wanted to have that experience. I was, after my third C-section, I was scared of that happening again. And then we had our stillborn, and I wanted to fight for it even harder. And having a home birth, having a VBAC helped, but I think having the home birth with the VBAC, it was healing. It was what I needed to heal from my previous 3 C-section experiences and from the stillbirth experience. I needed that to heal. Everybody's different. It's okay. Not everybody's choice will be your choice, and that's okay. But I know a lot of people get scared because of the possibilities of things going wrong with the home birth, and those same possibilities can happen in a hospital, and it's still not safe enough, if that makes sense.
There are no guarantees no matter what.
Nope.
Well, thank you
Thank you so much.
Everything. I loved hearing all of your stories.
I know, it went on for way longer than I thought it would.
That's okay. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Home Birth After Cesarean podcast. Make sure to subscribe, leave a rating, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. If you're interested in sharing your home birth after cesarean story, send us an email at HBA3C podcast@gmail.com. See you next week.